Hi, everyone. Stephen Vantassel here, wildlife control consultant, part of the Pest Geek podcast family. We are talking about living the wildlife here. So we're glad that you joined us today. And so we have an exciting time. We're here with, let me get his name out. So it's Eric Koch or Cook. How do you pronounce that? Cook?
Koch. Yeah.
Koch. Okay. So because different people pronounce it different ways. It's Koch. Yeah. So he works with a company that does laser for birds. But before we get started and have him on the show here, we're going to talk about our sponsor. We're very happy for our sponsor here, Aaron Bray of Servant Labs. So let me ask the question: Do you have a website? Do you have a WordPress blog or WordPress site? Do you have something that is challenging for you that you need some help with? Well, Aaron Bray can help you with your website. He's worked with me for a couple of years, and I've been pleased with his work, and I'm very glad to have him as a sponsor of Living the Wildlife podcast. And so definitely go check him out. He's at servantlabs.com. It's spelled just the way it sounds, Servant Labs, labs.com, servantlabs.com. Aaron Bray, definitely check him out. Tell him that Living the Wildlife podcast with the Pest Geek podcast family sent you along, and we'd be very happy. And of course, if you have a business or some sort of a service that you want to advertise, we need more sponsors for our Pest Geek podcast here. And so definitely reach out to me at the Wildlife Control Consultant at gmail.com, wildlife control consultant at gmail.com. All right, now that we got those introductions out of the way, so Eric, glad to have you here. Why don't you introduce yourself to the Pest Geek podcast family? What do you do?
Stephen, thanks for having me. My name is Eric Koch. I work with Bird Control Group. What we do is offer a green solution to take care of bird solution for multiple different avenues: agriculture, commercial, industrial, pretty much almost anywhere that you experience bird problems. Residential, we kind of stay away from a little bit.
Okay.
We have a product that you probably could use to a certain extent for residential or smaller handheld device, but typically it's more for commercial applications.
Okay. And what is it? So how does it work? What do you do?
So we use a laser beam. It's a class 3B laser. It's a green laser beam. It's the brightest spectrum of light that the birds realize as a threat coming at them. So we're not looking to point the laser at the birds. We're actually trying to bring the laser up to the birds so that they view it as a threat coming at them.
Okay.
So misconception, pointing a laser at a bird's not going to make it fly away. We want to treat it as a predator. We're acting as a predator coming up to attack the bird, which causes the fight or flight.
So you mentioned it was a class 3. Did you say class 3B or class 3?
Correct. It's a class 3B laser.
B laser. Can you just describe for those, because I'm certainly not familiar with some of those technical terms for our audience, and that would be helpful for them to understand a little bit more about how lasers are classified.
So we have a class 3B, which has the strength of the beam is up to 500 milliwatts.
Okay.
Ours runs about 480 milliwatts, so slightly under the threshold. So if you go over that threshold where you would go into a class 4, so that's anything over 500 milliwatts, class 4, that's actually where you can start to burn objects with this. The laser. So that's where you get into a lot more regulations, a lot more complications of where you can use that. It's not that bright. It is bright, but not that bright that it'll burn anybody.
Okay, and so what is a class 2? What would a class 2 be? Was that some of those pen handheld devices?
Yeah, you're looking at the smaller ones, or the ones you can buy at the pet stores or online at Amazon, things like that. The cheap ones, although it's still a laser. It just doesn't have the effect on the birds as much as what we can do with ours. Okay,
so describe how this product works. So if I have an agricultural setting, or let's say an industrial setting, what would be, why would I choose this particular product?
So in the agriculture setting, a lot of the farmers with the soft fruits such as wine grapes, blueberries, hascaps, sweet corn, things like that. The birds will come in right as the fruit is ready to harvest and actually damage all their crops. So instead of putting bird netting up that spans to be able to do any of the work, we would put up a laser. We actually can scan about 10 to 15 acres of land with one of these lasers. So it's programmable.
Wow. Okay.
So you would put it up typically about 12 to 15 feet up in the air, depending on the terrain. And we would program it. You program it right off of your smartphone, tablet, whatever. It has Bluetooth connectivity.
Okay.
You'll be able to program it to the time of day, so you can adapt to, if you're only having the birds coming in the evening, you only run it for a small period of time in the evening. And then so that's would cover the ag side of things that, it's crop protection on the ag side of the spectrum. So for the commercial, it's going to be your pest bird application. So wide open spaces, overhangs, like inside distribution warehouses where you need protection, where they have doors wide open all the time that the birds can fly freely. Yeah. So we would program this to scan around the ceiling to create the thought or perception that there's a predator in the loading dock or the warehouse area. So it would deter them from coming in that, instead of netting or spiking or, methylphenidate, the hazing units that you can put up there.
Right. Yeah, so that's fascinating. So let's explore, I think for most of our listeners, the commercial application would certainly be something more economic. I'm in the position in my job where I have to work, where I work with some agricultural folks. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So those of you in our podcast area that are more in agricultural areas, you might want to, follow up with Eric and chat more with him. We're going to try to drill down a little bit more into the industrial, because I think that's going to be more interesting for most of our audience. So let's talk about something. I was in a big box store, hardware store recently, and I'll tell you, it annoys the living daylights out of me. All you hear is cheap, 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 because you have those house sparrows. And I went up to a salesman. I said, "Do you hear anything?" And the guy, he was being sarcastic with me. At least that's how I interpreted it. He said, "No, I don't hear anything." And I don't have good hearing as it is. And it was just annoying the living day. I handed him my business card, my card from my job with the government. And I just handed it. I said, "You guys got to get this fixed. This is ridiculous." And I said some other things. But the point was, Can it work in that situation, or is there just too many people, too many objects in the way for that?
So the answer, yes and no, depending. It's really, if you're going to put it into a situation like that, it's more of a preventative maintenance.
Okay.
You would have to remove the birds first. The typical way, if targeting with mist netting. Yeah. To remove the birds first, and then put up the laser as a secondary thing to now put in an area that would be less favorable for the birds.
Gotcha. So the problem is of course, most like good Americans, we never do anything preventatively, right? We always wait till it's a crisis, and then we complain this didn't work. So right. You're saying is that this product ideally should be in situations where before the birds before they habituated to the site.
Yes, if it's an interior type of application, like your warehouses and things like that. Exterior, we can certainly move the birds. The larger the birds, the better as far as moving them. Okay. The problem that you deal with on the smaller birds, they're cavity nesting sparrows and starlings. So getting that laser beam actually up to the nesting area is kind of challenging. So, you know.
So you want to do some exclusion to stop some of that nesting material, but if they're loafing, this is the product. So this is the product to use when they're loafing.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, like an aircraft hangar, where you're inside the hangar, the birds are nesting maybe up in the door beam pockets and things like that, but then they're perching out on the fire suppression system up over where the planes are. This is an ideal application for that. Instead of spending, $50,000, $100,000 to net it off,
right?
Stick one of these lasers in, and it's just as effective.
So let's talk about cost. Now, you brought up the issue of, because you're comparing costs with the platinum solution, which is netting. I call it the platinum solution. Those aren't your words or my words. The platinum solution is netting. I mean, if you build them out, obviously the problem's over, but you're correct. It can be extraordinarily expensive. So how does your product compare in terms of cost? So
our unit itself, which is the AVIX Connect or AVIX Autonomic, runs $9,950 for retail.
Okay.
And then depending on the application and the installation, you can start adding up a little bit more money, maybe tops of $15,000.
All right.
Depending on what your labor costs would look like.
Gotcha. So that labor would be by the technician, not you guys aren't coming out and installing it. It's going to be the client.
We can, but we would prefer to work with wildlife applications, pest control companies that are able to have some sort of capabilities to do this.
All right.
It is hands down the easiest bird control that you could probably do.
Yeah.
If you can play a video game, you can probably program this. It's very
hear
simple.
that, everybody? If you have workers that play video games, this is the device for them. Okay, that's hilarious. So so that's kind of cool. So there's going to be support. You'd want people to send you photographs to sort of map out the area to see how many lasers you might need, because one may not be enough. Whether the site would be suitable, you would walk that client through all that before they pull the trigger. Can they rent it? Are they rentable?
So we do also offer a lease program.
Okay.
That's a lot more in the ag side of things. The commercial, industrial typically just will purchase it outright.
Right.
But yes, we do offer a leasing program.
Oh, excellent. So, and then how long does the device last? So I'm dropping $10,000 basically on device. How long?
Right.
I mean, obviously, let's talk about outdoor applications, because obviously that's a much more difficult for the product to withstand as opposed to indoor. Let's just talk outdoor right now. For what would be the length of lifespan on that?
So the laser beam itself is rated for 5,000 hours.
Okay.
So it would depend on how often you're really using that.
All right.
Because depending on the bird species you deal with, you may only use it for a couple hours out of the day and only a couple months out of the year. If it's a migratory issue. If you're running it constantly, you're right about a year's worth of time that you can actually use out of the laser till it starts. You may start seeing some the effect of the laser, the brightness of the laser will actually start to dim down. Okay. Once that happens, though, the way it's designed, we have 4 bolts that come off the housing of the front, and it screws back in, and it's just like screwing in a light bulb. Mm-hmm. And that's just about an $1,800 fix.
Oh, that's not bad. I mean, that's not bad at all. So the housing of the product sounds like it's extraordinarily durable. That's going to be around for years, and you just have to. It's sort of like what do we call it? Like a PowerPoint projector, right? You're just basically replacing the bulb as you use it. Right. I gotcha. Okay. So how about safety? Safety issues with this device?
So safety, it's because it's a laser. You always have to worry about it. It's definitely an eye risk for sure. Okay. Could cause blindness. Now with our system, the way it's designed, it's constantly moving. So actually staring into it for a long period of time is kind of challenging, unless you're standing right up on top of it.
Right.
So we try to use this in wide open spaces where there's limited access. So your public places, if you're going to use it in public places such as a warehouse or distribution area, hangars, things like that, we're going to be pointing it up towards the ceiling where it's going to be very minimal, if any, interaction with people. All right. You won't see it. However, if you're in like a parking lot or a pond, around a pond for geese, you've got to watch where you're going to have people. Right. It's got to be a controlled environment for our product.
Sure, like a private lake.
Correct.
Or where people
rooftops.
can. Yeah. So now you talked about it. It has now. Is there a built-in timer to it, or do you rely on an?
Your picture behind you left.
Yes, we're going to have to use nails. We tried using those stick-ups because I'm trying to get a little better background, everybody, and we're obviously having some challenges. That was unfortunate. So there's there an internal timer?
So there's an internal timer, but with the program that we have that goes on it's an app for your Apple Android device.
Okay.
That has a time slots in it that you can program 24 hours a day, 16 different programs. So you can adjust that however you would like, what time of day that you're seeing the problems. You can run it all day long if you're having birds there all day long.
Right,
It's all very easily programmed.
So with Bluetooth, you have to be within 30, 40 feet or something.
About 60 feet. Yeah. If we have them mounted way up, for example, like a telephone pole in an electrical area, we can stand on the ground and still have access to it.
Gotcha. So is there a way to even do it remotely? Is that technology available?
It's not yet. We have it in the works right now. And we actually have a second portion of this that we'll be rolling out next year. It's in the design phase that has a camera to it, which will have remote accessibility to it. We'll actually be able to program it. You'll have the customer actually pull it out of the box, install it where they want, and we can take a look at it on TV and, adjust where the birds are and set programs if needed.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk about geese. You said 15 acres. That's 10 to 15 acres. That's a pretty big area. So
correct.
If you're keeping those geese off of the water, you're likely going to keep them off the ground as well. Is that kind of the goal?
Correct. Yeah. Depending on the situation, are the birds there, the geese there because they're feeding? Are they there because they're nesting? Or are they there just because it's a waterway, that they want to be in?
Right.
But yeah, all three situations, we would set up the poles. We could poles or however we would look to mount that based on the terrain there. And then the idea with the geese is you bring it up to the beam up to their feet, and it causes them to move very quickly.
Yeah.
So anywhere we can get at them, on the water, it's kind of coming up to their body, up around when it starts getting around their chest area, they don't like that and start to move on pretty quick.
Right. So do you have larger birds, seagulls? Let's go down the list. Let's go ahead.
We got gulls, geese. We can move heron, the blue heron. We've moved around the aquaculture areas.
Oh, really? Okay.
So we've got cormorants to a certain extent, depending on the situation. We've been able to move them successfully.
All right.
Pigeons, starlings, sparrows, crows, grackles, you name it. The only one that I haven't had a ton of experience or a ton of luck with is turkey vultures.
Oh, okay.
Turkey vultures, sometimes we'll get them to move, sometimes they won't.
How about black vultures?
Yeah, black vultures, the same.
Same thing?
Something with I don't know if it's their optical nerves that may be seeing the beam differently, or I'm not sure. It's something new to me.
Yeah. Have you guys considered trying a different color, like red, perhaps? So
I have used red in the past, and have been able to move them in the past, but we don't offer a red laser at this point.
Is there a difference in terms of? Is it the wavelength problem? Is there why wouldn't you just put a different bulb in and get a different color? Is there? I don't know enough about lasers, so I'm showing my ignorance here.
No, we certainly can. I mean, they're out there on the market. It's just because the green we've found has been successful for so many different types of species across the world. That's why we continue to go with the green. Gotcha. Again, it's the brightest spectrum of light that the birds see. So that's why we specialize with the green.
Interesting. Because I think that there's a growing challenge with some of the turkey vultures. And I'm going to throw another one out to you just because it's such a weird animal, peacocks. Have you guys ever tried anything with peacocks?
I haven't come across that yet. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Normally the peacocks are in the zoo. So.
Well, I agree. It's been totally bizarre, but I've been told, I have never seen this personally. I just had wildlife control operator guys telling me that, I live in California and there's a peacock in this neighborhood and they fly to the rooftops of places and they're loud as all get out. They're basically like a glorified rooster, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I'm told in Florida, there's a community down there that says you can't do anything with the peacocks, right? So I'm like, this is absolutely insane. So people have these birds flying up to the peak of their roof and they're just screaming out whatever a peacock does. Yeah, typically when I've seen them, they've always been in the zoo, but people are these exotic. Yeah, so I figured I'd just throw that out. Maybe it's another marketing tool you guys could we'll check out whether it works on peacocks. So, so the issue of the safety issue, because I have two difficult questions for you, and that is, as hackers have become more aggressive around the world, the whole hacking thing and the issue of Bluetooth, what kind of security is there? Because as people having lasers how easy would it be for someone if they took over the device and then pointed it at an airplane, put it out into the sky to go after airplanes?
Right.
What kind of security apparatus do you have in the device to sort of make it harder to hack?
So I'm not very well versed with computers and hacking and things like that, but we have the app, and the only way to control the device is to get the app, and we own the app itself. So we only give permission to the end user to be able to program it.
All right.
If they got a hold of it, they have, if they could get it, they get it into it and get it apart, you would have a laser bulb. I don't know what value it would be to them. Yeah. We have it out in the farmer field, and if somebody stole it off a farm field, it's basically useless for them. So it's very user-friendly and not so much hacker-friendly because there's not a lot of uses for it. In addition to that, we have sensors in it, the horizon sensors, which don't allow it to go up over a certain 30-degree angle.
Oh, okay.
So although planes do fly at a lower elevation, when they're landing, typically this laser will not be able to be shined up in the air that far.
Right. Gotcha. Well, those are interesting. So how would you, when you're discussing something with a potential client, let's explore a little bit more about the cost effectiveness. So I can certainly see when you're dealing with rooftops, which are typically fairly wide open. You have some, air conditioning units up there per se, but I would think that a large big box type store or a massive warehouse, this would be something. Would you put the device typically in the middle of the roof, or do you put them at a corner of the roof? What's the typical modus operandi there?
Typically catty corner on the corners.
Okay.
So you limit the amount of time that it takes to go from point A to point B on the roof from one corner to the next. Okay. Minimize that. So you have two of them, just because you're going to get some blind spots from the AC units, anything up there, that they have on the roof. So you want to kind of catty corner it. So that's typically your gulls and geese that we're dealing with up on a rooftop like that.
Okay. So if a wildlife control operator has a client, they have, let's say, gulls on top of a particular roof, or maybe even an inordinate number of pigeons that are sort of loafing on this particular roof, would you be advising them to try the device first and then see if they needed to do some trapping removal if they're too habituated on that roof? Or have you seen enough success where even birds are habituated to loafing there? I'm not talking about nesting. I think nesting's a different level altogether. But we would call it medium pressure using bird barriers schema. So you have light pressure, medium pressure, high pressure. High pressure is nesting. That's the hardest to move, obviously. Right. But with loafing, if they've been attached, especially if there's water nearby, or maybe there's a food source nearby, and they're just kind of hanging out and they're sunning themselves, would you suggest trapping first and then installing the device, or try the device first to see if you can get a solution right off the bat?
I would just go directly with the laser right away, and then explore the trapping options secondary. Especially in a loafing situation, we can move them pretty easily. Again, they see this as coming as a threat. All of a sudden, they were up there, it was nice and comfortable for years on end, and now all of a sudden, there's a threat at them, coming at them every day. With the pigeon, if you have a hawk coming around, all of a sudden, they start to get the idea pretty quick and move on. So that's the idea with the laser. It's the same principle. We'll put that predator threat up there and typically moves them on.
Gotcha. So is there a handheld version, or have you ever seen a need for a handheld version?
Correct. I actually have two of them with me. So this is our smaller version.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right. All right. AgriLaser Lite. So this is our smaller one. This is the one we would use indoors or very, very low light situations. Right at dusk or right at the beginning of daylight, you can use this outside pretty effectively up to about 50 yards. Oh, okay.
But once the sun comes out, it's just not bright enough. Doesn't pack enough punch to filter through once the sun comes out.
And what does that device retail for?
That one is $397.
Okay.
And then we have this nice big boy here.
Oh, wow.
So this one runs for $2,895. This one you can hit broad daylight. The beam comes out about 2 inches round, and I can stand about 500 yards out broad daylight, and I can hit a building 500 yards out. You'll see the 2 inch round beam just as bright as what it is at your feet.
Wow.
So it moves pretty significantly.
And what powers that? And what powers that?
Just a small battery.
Small battery? Is it lithium? Is it rechargeable?
Battery. It comes, when we sell them, it comes with the batteries themselves.
Gotcha. Okay.
So with the charger. So you'll get all that together.
So would that be something you would recommend if someone had a large lake that they needed to move geese off of? Would this be a particular product that you would suggest? With the handhelds, what I would suggest with the handhelds, if you're running dogs, if you have like the geese police, things like that you're chasing the dogs with, you actually use the handheld in conjunction. Okay. So the laser will go a lot further than the dog ever will, and especially faster than the dog ever will. So you don't run your dogs, you don't get them as worried, as wore out. You can use them a lot. Utilize the laser in combination. Okay. Also, if you're a falconer, you can use this kind of a training tool as to, hey, the falcons are around, I see that laser. They get down, they start training them to get accustomed to seeing that laser. They think that the threat's around, combination approach with the handhelds. Okay. So how about using pyrotechnics so you talked about a dog, some biological controls, like with a dog hazing or with a falcon hazing, anything like with pyrotechnics?
I wouldn't see why not. I mean, you're getting the bird's attention with the pyrotechnics, plus you see that laser beam around. I think the combination would probably you'd be pretty successful with that as well.
Gotcha. Anything that I've missed here that you think that you'd want to be sure that our listeners, again, they're PCOs, they're wildlife control operators, they're people in the business of doing vertebrate control, and so that you would want to be sure that they understand about your product that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, so a combination with our autonomic system that we offer, you can actually utilize that as a reoccurring revenue stream for you. We would recommend once you install it, set up a quarterly service. One, to make sure that everything's working properly, which is not an issue, but reassurance for the customer. Make sure that you get the longevity out of the machine. The second thing is to also, if you do it quarterly, you can adjust the time slots so that you don't have that beam as bright. In the the summertime, you're going to need that running at 100%. Okay. We can, in the evenings, you can dial that way down to 20%. That's something that we didn't cover, but something that is unique about our lasers. We can adjust the strength of the laser in that program so that it's not so bright. you're not putting on a laser light show for your neighbors at 10 o'clock at night. You can certainly adjust the laser beam itself.
So do you sell smoke machines too? So be like little mirrored balls or anything, you know?
None of that fun stuff. You can. So you can be kind to your neighbor. It's a quiet machine. The last thing you want to do is like the pyrotechnics and the ag side of things, really scare the neighbors. This is quiet. You can adjust that if you're not getting the activity. You can turn it off at night. So. Okay. Part of that quarterly service is to make those adjustments.
So when you're lowering down the intensity of that particular beam, does that also extend the life of the bulb, or is it simply if it's on, is the 5,000 hours based on or off?
We're not 100% sure.
Okay.
We would like to say that it does help because you're not burning it at 100%. So it should give you a longer life of the laser itself.
And what power source do you need for your automatic device there for the big daddy one? I mean, what kind of, do you have to have electrical power? Can you use solar panels?
We can do both. So
really?
Correct. Okay. Yeah. So it's set up. You can just plug into a regular 110 volt plug outlet up on the roof. So some of the rooftops, if they have the AC units, they'll typically have a power box up there. You can plug right into that.
Oh, cool.
Or we have the solar option, which we use 200 watt panels with two 12 volt deep cycle batteries to power it up. It only uses about enough electric, like a 60 watt light bulb is about the draw of the laser. The whole time.
That's not bad.
So all right. Very minimal expense to run this.
So another question I didn't ask, and that is insulation. So let's talk about the roof, because I would think our listeners would be like, well, how do I fasten this to the roof? Let's say I'm in Nebraska or here in Montana, we have high winds. I don't want to penetrate the rubber sealant on this roof because I already have enough leaks with it. I hate flat roofs. They're awful. So how would you suggest that this be anchored, installed so it's proper to your company's specifications, but that we're not worried about it taking the header off the roof and going through someone's windshield?
So we sell a horizontal frame that it can mount to.
All right.
It's 12 total bolts to put it together, and with the leg extension comes up to about 5 feet.
Okay.
So it'll sit right on any rooftop that you have. If you're going to put it down, I'd recommend putting maybe a block or something underneath the legs, just so it doesn't wear, the wind bouncing around a little bit and wear into a rubber roof.
Yeah.
And then put a weight on, about 50-pound weight. So
50-pound weight. I gotcha.
Patio block, the patio pavers are 18 by 18, I think are about 46 pounds.
Yeah.
Is typically what I'll put on the horizontal frame. And
excellent.
The machine itself, once it's set up, is only 23 pounds.
Okay.
So it's not a very heavy device.
Yeah. And so it doesn't have a large wind profile, so there's not a lot for the wind to grab. That's why you're using a frame, right? So there's not a lot for the wind to grip. Oh, excellent.
Now, some of the other off-the-wall ideas that we see on the ag side of things, we've had some of the farmers hook them up to trailers and put trailers on to roll them around their property as they plant or it's needed. Deer stands, we've had quite a few put on deer stands, so you can get up 12 feet pretty easily.
Right.
Pretty light and functional. And we can mount them, on handrails, things like that. Depending on the structure, you can put it up there. It's 4 bolts. It's all it takes.
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, anything else that we may have missed is we want to make sure you tell people how to get a hold of you. Let's talk about how to get a hold of your company.
Right. So I'm with Bird Control Group. Our website is birdcontrolgroup.com, birdcontrolgroup.com. And we are based here in U.S., based out of Wilsonville, Oregon. I'm actually in Pennsylvania. We have sales reps throughout the U.S., and our home office is over in the Netherlands.
Wow. So this has actually been used in Europe before it came to the United States.
Correct. We've only been in the U.S. for about 4 years now.
So are you a subsidiary, or are you a separate company with a license with the Netherland Group?
We are the same company.
Same company. Oh, okay.
Yep.
So absolutely. Wow. Well, I want to thank you very much for attending. Hope you enjoyed your time here with the Pest Geek podcast family. So we'll be posting this up in probably a couple of weeks. So I don't have too far. My information isn't too. I don't have too many podcasts ahead of you here. So we're really glad you give Eric Koch, I got that right. Eric Koch of the Bird Control Group. That's birdcontrolgroup.com. We're really glad that you were able to come with us. Hi, everybody. Again, we're glad you were able to listen to our podcast. Again, I'm Stephen Vantassel, wildlifecontrolconsultant.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant.com. We're very glad that you were able to join us. Hey, send me some feedback. Let us know what you're interested in, what podcasts you'd like to see in the future, topics that you'd like to have, and even criticisms. Perhaps we missed something here today and you'd want to sound off. We'd be glad to hear it, even though it's not as fun as getting all the compliments. Definitely reach out to me again, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, and make sure you subscribe to us. Give us some stars. 5 stars would be really nice for those of you listening to our podcast, and definitely join us up on YouTube. Really glad to have you. Eric Koch, Bird Control Group, thanks again for being with us. Bye, everybody, and be safe.